"What do you mean they turned you down?" Vincent Foster's voice was even, but his eyes were sharp as he leaned across the table toward his cousin. "You had the adoption fee, right?" "Yes," said Claire, cradling her coffee like it could calm her nerves. But the woman's senior handler, or something, said it wasn't enough. Claimed the dog I wanted was a premium breed and I'd need to pay another 100. In cash. Vincent leaned back, jaw tight. He didn't say anything for a moment. Just stared out the cafe window at the rainy street. He owned all 18 locations of the shelter chain now. Bought them 6 years ago from a retired veterinarian who'd built his life around rescuing animals. Vincent had promised to stay true to that mission. But lately, complaints about this specific shelter, in the northeast part of town, were stacking up. Still, he never liked making decisions off secondhand stories. He believed in seeing things with his own eyes. So he made a call. 2 days later, Vincent stood in the back hallway of the shelter's break room, wearing a battered flannel shirt, scuffed boots, and a ball cap pulled low. A fake ID badge clipped to his jacket read, "Troy Volunteer Trainee." He'd shaved his beard and wore thick-rimmed glasses. No one at this location had met him in person before he only did surprise visits at random stores, and this one had never been on his list. The manager had only exchanged emails with him through his assistant. "Hey, you the new guy?" A short, wiry man in his 40s asked, poking his head around the corner. "I'm Dean." Vincent nodded. "Yeah, first day." Dean grunted. "Good luck, hope you like cleaning kennels." The shelter was busy. They were short-staffed. 2 people had quit last week, and a third was out sick, which meant Dean, the manager, was edgy and barking orders. Still, the animals were well fed and the place smelled clean. That gave Vincent some hope, until he met Wanda. She was in her mid-50s, tall, with perfectly styled hair and a clipboard she never let go of. She was introduced to him as Wanda Newton, senior handler. He spent his first hour shadowing her. She barely looked at him. "Don't touch the dogs unless I say so," she snapped when he reached for a leash. "Right," Vincent said quietly. She watched people come in and out of the shelter like a hawk. Whenever someone showed interest in a dog, she swooped in. Vincent noticed something strange after the 3rd adoption. She always took the person aside, away from the front desk. She'd talk low, then walk them to the back with her clipboard. A few minutes later, they either left looking confused or handed her cash. Vincent didn't say anything yet. He needed more. That afternoon, a young couple walked in with their daughter. The girl, maybe 6 or 7, ran straight to a golden retriever mix and pressed her face to the glass. "Hi there," Wanda said, immediately stepping in. "Beautiful dog, right?" "She's perfect," the mother said. "We saw her online and drove over." "Of course," Wanda smiled without warmth. "Let's talk over here." She led them away from the desk again. Vincent quietly followed, pretending to clean a nearby crate. He kept his head down but listened. "For this dog, the adoption fee's a bit higher," Wanda said. "She's a rare mix. It's an additional 100. Cash only, off the books." The mother frowned. "I thought the website said the fee was $150. "Base rate, yes," Wanda said smoothly. "But that doesn't apply to special cases. If you're serious, I need a decision now. We've had others asking." The father hesitated. "We don't have that much in cash." Wanda's tone hardened. "Then, can't hold her." The little girl looked up, confused. "Daddy, we're not getting her." "Let's go," the woman said, voice tight. Vincent watched them walk out. The dog they wanted sat quietly behind the glass, tail wagging as the girl turned for one last look. That's when Vincent's hands curled into fists inside his jacket. Something was off, seriously off. Later that evening, when the shelter closed, Vincent stayed behind under the pretense of cleaning crates. He waited until Dean walked out and Wanda was alone in the office. Then he knocked. She barely looked up. "What?" "I have a question," Vincent said, stepping in. About that retriever mix. Why did that family get turned down? Wanda narrowed her eyes. You're just a trainee, that's not your business. He stepped closer. You told them the price was higher, cash only. She stood. Excuse me, you trying to accuse me of something? I watched you take cash 3 times today, Vincent said calmly. Off the books, that's not standard policy. Her voice rose. I've been here 10 years. I know what I'm doing. Maybe you should worry about scrubbing kennels and not pretend you're in charge. Vincent stared at her. Maybe I should, he said, his voice low. Or maybe I should remind you who really is in charge. Wanda blinked. What? He pulled off his cap and glasses. I'm Vincent Foster. I own this entire company. Wanda's mouth opened, but no sound came out. She stared at Vincent like her brain was struggling to catch up with what she just heard. Her nails tapped against the clipboard once, then stopped. You're not serious, she said finally, voice quieter now. I am, Vincent replied. And I saw everything. You've been collecting cash from adopters and pocketing it. That's theft. She squared her shoulders. That's not theft. I've been here longer than anyone. I know which dogs pull in more interest. It's not my fault the adoption pricing system is outdated. I adjust for demand. Vincent's eyes didn't waver. We don't adjust for demand. We run a rescue, not a pet shop. You don't understand how this place runs, she snapped, the old fire returning. These fees cover supplies, cleaning costs. We don't get enough funding from corporate. You don't make up for that by shaking down families, he cut in. You've been doing this behind the front desk. That's deliberate. You knew it wasn't allowed. She folded her arms. Without me, this place would collapse. Dean can barely keep up. You think any of these kids can handle the medical intakes or behavioral assessments? I'm the only one trained. Vincent didn't look away. Then you should have trained your team, not used your experience as leverage to steal. Wanda scoffed. You think firing me is going to fix this? Go ahead, but you'll have no one left to manage the dogs. Good luck finding someone who will work 60 hours a week for what you pay. Vincent reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. You can gather your things. I've already sent a message to HR. Your employment's terminated, effective immediately. And if we find any of that unreported cash, we'll pursue charges. Her face went pale for half a second. Then she turned without another word and walked out of the office, shoulders stiff. Vincent stood for a moment, exhaling slowly. The silence that followed was thick and heavy. The only sound came from the kennels down the hall, the soft shuffle of paws and the occasional bark echoing through the concrete walls. He locked the office door behind him and walked back out to the main floor. Dean was wiping down the intake counter with a rag that had seen better days. The overhead lights buzzed softly. You're still here, Dean asked, not looking up. Wanda's gone, Vincent said. That made him stop. What? I let her go 30 minutes ago, Vincent said. She was pocketing adoption fees. Dean blinked. Seriously? Vincent nodded. You knew something was off. You just didn't want to deal with it. Dean ran a hand through his thinning hair. I mean, yes, I saw her pull people to the side, but she always said it was about paperwork. Figured she was just trying to keep the line moving. You're the manager here, Vincent said. You should have asked questions. Dean looked down. You're right. Vincent didn't press the point. He could already see the strain in Dean's shoulders, the way his hands trembled slightly when he put the rag down. This wasn't someone who didn't care. This was someone buried under too much for too long. How many people on staff right now? Vincent asked. Dean sighed. Just me, 2 part-timers, and a couple of volunteers. We've had 3 people quit in the last month. Low pay, long hours. I've been working double shifts just to keep intake running. You should have flagged that, Vincent said. I did. Emailed your assistant twice last week. Got a generic reply. Vincent's jaw tightened. That's on me. I've been too far removed. Dean leaned on the counter. Look, I get it. You've got a company to run, but this place, it's hanging by a thread. We get 20 dogs a week and only a few leave. We're short on meds, low on food. I've put in $200 of my own money just to keep the puppies fed. Vincent's stomach turned. Why didn't anyone say something sooner? Who would listen? Dean asked. Wanda ran the place like it was hers. New kids were scared of her. I just kept my head down. Vincent looked around. The walls, once painted a soft yellow, were stained and dull. The bulletin board hadn't been updated in months. Half the leashes hanging on the rack were frayed. A pile of unopened supply boxes sat near the back entrance. Where's the volunteer log? He asked. Dean took a clipboard from a drawer and handed it over. Vincent scanned the names. Several had stopped showing up weeks ago. He flipped to the schedule. The next week was almost blank. I'm going to be here every day for the next week, Vincent said. No assistants, no filters. I want to see it all. Dean looked surprised. You sure? I'm staying in town, Vincent said. I'll work intake, kennel cleaning, adoptions, whatever's needed. Dean gave a small nod. We could use the help. By the next morning, word had spread. The volunteers arrived earlier than usual, curious and cautious. Vincent didn't waste time. He pulled crates, washed bowls, and walked dogs no clipboard in sight. He didn't introduce himself as the owner again, just worked the shift like everyone else. That afternoon, he saw a teenage volunteer in the back, struggling to lift a crate with a limping terrier inside. She looked overwhelmed. Need a hand? Vincent asked. She nodded gratefully. I'm Maya, the dog came in this morning, no tag, no chip. Vincent gently took the other side. Let's get him to the exam room. As they settled the dog down on a padded mat, Maya kept glancing at him. You're not like the others, she said finally. What do you mean? You're actually helping. Most people just give orders. She hesitated, then added, Wanda used to yell at me if I asked questions. Said I was slowing things down. Vincent's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice calm. That won't happen anymore. Maya smiled faintly. Thanks. Later, during lunch, Vincent sat with the two part-timers, Jordan and Arif, in the cramped break room. The air smelled like microwaved pasta and bleach. Jordan spoke first. You're the guy who fired Wanda, right? Vincent nodded. She had a list, Jordan said, of people she didn't let adopt. She called it her gut list, said certain folks gave her a bad feeling. Based on what? Vincent asked. Arif looked uncomfortable. It wasn't about behavior, it was about looks, race sometimes, accent, clothes. Vincent felt heat rise in his chest. You're sure? Jordan nodded. She told me not to let a guy adopt last week because he had tattoos. Said he looked like he'd used the dog for fighting. He was a vet, had his discharge papers and everything. Vincent stood. That ends now. If either of you ever see discrimination again, report it directly to me. No delays. They both looked startled, then nodded. By evening, Vincent sat in his car outside the shelter, exhausted. His shirt clung to his back, and his hands were raw from scrubbing kennels. But the worst part wasn't the physical work, it was knowing how far things had drifted from the values he'd built the company on. He pulled out his phone and started typing. A memo to all shelter locations. Effective immediately. Anonymous reporting channels, a new oversight committee, and mandatory ethics training for all senior staff. He wasn't going to let this happen again. And tomorrow he'd be back at the shelter. Same boots, same shirt. No clipboard, just work. By Thursday morning, the cold had settled deep into the shelter's concrete floors. Vincent stood outside the rear loading dock, his breath visible as he hauled open a pallet of donated food that had been sitting untouched since Monday. No one had mentioned it. No one had time. He dumped the first bag of kibble into the storage bin just as Jordan came running out, pulling on a hoodie mid-stride. "I didn't know it arrived," Jordan said, rubbing his hands together. "Wanda never told us when shipments came. She usually kept the keys to the back room." "Not anymore," Vincent said, handing him a box cutter. "Let's inventory it all. We need an accurate count before the weekend rush." Inside, a new family waited to meet a shepherd mix named Ginger. Dean handled the paperwork at the front desk, his voice steady, but his eyes darted to the clock every few seconds. He hadn't left the building in 4 days. Vincent noticed, so had the others. "Schedule 2 hours off this afternoon," Vincent told him between crate cleanings. "No excuses." Dean looked at him like he hadn't heard correctly. "Go take a walk," Vincent added. "Or get a coffee somewhere that doesn't smell like bleach and wet fur. You're no good to anyone if you collapse." Dean didn't argue. By mid-morning, adoption appointments picked up. Maya handled the first one solo, guiding a retired couple through the process with an ease that surprised even her. Vincent watched from a distance, folding clean towels near the intake doors. When she returned, she looked both relieved and proud. "I didn't think I'd remember all the forms," she said. "You didn't just remember," Vincent said. "You ran it better than some paid staff have seen." She lit up for half a second, then glanced down. "Wanda used to redo my paperwork behind my back, said I made things messy." Vincent didn't respond right away. Instead, he reached for the clipboard sitting nearby. "How about you help update the intake profiles this week?" he said. "We need better descriptions, honest ones, not just breed guesses and age estimates." Maya blinked, seriously. "You see the dogs more than anyone. You know their personalities. That matters." She nodded slowly, like the idea needed time to settle in. At noon, a man in his late 40s walked in with a leash dragging behind him. On the other end, a pit bull limped beside him, ribs showing, fur patchy from old sores. The man didn't speak as he approached the front desk. He just unclipped the leash and turned to leave. Dean stepped in front of the door. "Wait, you can't just abandon him." Vincent was already moving toward them. "He's not mine," the man muttered. "Found him near the train tracks." Dean frowned. "Where exactly?" "Does it matter?" the man snapped, stepping back. "You take strays right there, he's yours." Vincent looked down at the dog, who was sitting quietly despite a raw wound near his shoulder. There was no collar, no tag, but the way the dog kept glancing at the man told him everything. Vincent turned to face him. "What's his name?" The man froze. "I said I found him." "No one said anything about names," Vincent replied, "so I'll ask again." The man's eyes narrowed. "Look, I don't need this." "If you walk out that door, I'm calling animal control," Vincent said. "And I'll give them your face, your license plate, and a statement. They'll decide what happens next." The man hesitated, then muttered something under his breath and pushed past him. Vincent didn't move out of the way. The man had to sidestep. Dean let out a breath as the door slammed shut. That was a little tense. Vincent crouched beside the dog, who leaned into his palm without hesitation. "His name's probably Duke," he said softly. "We'll get the vet to check him, then we post his photo. If no one claims him in 7 days, we list him for adoption." Dean nodded, still watching the door. An hour later, Vincent found Arif sitting outside the break room, staring at a blank intake form. "You all right?" Vincent asked. Arif nodded quickly, then shook his head. "I'm fine, just that guy earlier reminded me of someone." Vincent sat beside him. You ever had a dog? He asked. Back home, yeah, Arif said. Before we left Syria, she was a street rescue too. Vincent didn't say anything for a moment, just waited. She used to wait outside our door every morning, wouldn't go anywhere else. My mom said she chose us. Vincent nodded slowly. You're good with the shy ones, he said. I've seen it. Dogs that won't go near anyone else, they walk straight to you. Arif gave a small shrug. Maybe they just smell the kibble in my pocket. Vincent smiled faintly, then stood. I want you working intake this weekend. With Maya, you two know the dogs better than anyone here. Arif looked surprised. Really? Yeah, and we'll pay you for the extra hours. He didn't wait for thanks, just walked back to the storage room and began relabeling the feeding bins. Behind him, he heard Arif's chair scrape as he stood and headed back out. By late afternoon, the shelter was buzzing. A local news outlet had picked up a social media post about a volunteer-run rescue success story, a dog named Ellie who'd been adopted by a deaf couple after Maya taught her basic hand signals. Vincent hadn't even known about it until Jordan showed it to him on his phone. We should have more of this stuff online, Jordan said. People love it. Adoption rates spike every time it happens. Then build a board, Vincent said. You and Arif, pick a corner of the lobby, make it into a success stories wall. Photos, names, dates. No filters, no corporate branding, just stories. Jordan grinned. Can I add quotes from the adopters? Definitely, just keep it real. As the evening shift rolled in, a new volunteer stepped through the door. Vincent didn't recognize her. She was young, maybe 20, with short pink hair and a backpack that looked like it had survived a hurricane. Dean looked up from the front desk. You the one who emailed about weekend hours? She nodded. Yeah, I'm Alex. I can do mornings. I've worked with rescues before. Dean handed her a clipboard. You'll shadow Vincent. She turned to him, eyebrows raised. You're the guy who kicked out that handler, right? Vincent didn't answer, just nodded once. Cool, Alex said. Heard she was a nightmare, wouldn't even let me fill out an app last year. Said it didn't look serious enough, whatever that means. Vincent's jaw tightened. You're here now, he said. We'll see how serious you are. In the back, Ginger was barking again. Loud, persistent. Vincent walked over, knelt by her crate, and saw the problem. Her toy was jammed under the corner of the wall. She couldn't reach it. He reached through, retrieved the slobbery plush, and handed it back. She quieted immediately. As he stood, Meyer appeared beside him, holding a clipboard. You were right about her, she said. She hates being ignored. She just wants someone to talk to her. Vincent looked at the dog, tail wagging now, toy in her mouth. Don't we all? The fluorescent lights buzzed above them, casting long shadows across the floor. Somewhere in the back, a dog barked once and then fell silent. Vincent glanced at the clock. It was nearly closing time. But the work wasn't done. Tomorrow, they'd be back. With new volunteers, a better system, and no one left to take advantage of the people or animals who needed them most. By the following Monday, Vincent was already in the shelter before sunrise, rolling up his sleeves in the back room while the building was still quiet. The early shift had become routine for him, now he preferred it. It gave him time to walk the rows of kennels alone, clipboard in hand, noting which dogs were eating, which weren't, and which had started showing signs of stress from the long stays. Ginger, the shepherd mix, had stopped pacing at night. Duke, the pit bull from the previous week, was healing faster than expected. And the new intake from Saturday, a three-legged terrier named Cricket, had already won over every volunteer with her lopsided hop and unshakable energy. But even with the progress, the intake board was full. Too full. And adoptions, while steady, weren't outpacing new arrivals. By 8, Dean arrived with dark circles under his eyes, and a travel mug that looked like it hadn't been washed all week. "You didn't take the weekend off, did you?" Vincent asked, not looking up from the kennel notes. Dean leaned on the doorframe, voice flat. "Didn't feel right. One of the dogs threw up blood Friday night. Took him to the emergency clinic." "Is he stable?" "Yeah, gastritis. Probably from trash he ate before we picked him up." Vincent nodded. "You should have called me." Dean hesitated. "Didn't want to bother you. Figured you had enough on your plate." Vincent finally looked up. "I'll decide what's too much. Don't carry things alone anymore. That's not happening here again." Dean gave a short nod, then stepped inside to grab the intake forms for the day. Outside, Maya was guiding a new adopter through the yard, showing her how to walk Cricket on a leash. The woman, middle-aged, soft-spoken, had recently lost her senior dog after 13 years and wasn't sure she was ready again. But Cricket's crooked grin had cracked something open. "She doesn't pity you," Maya said as they looped around the fence. "Most people think dogs like her are sad. She doesn't think she's missing anything." The woman laughed just once and nodded. Inside, Jordan was reorganizing the supply shelves, muttering to himself about missing gloves and leashes being stored with treats. Vincent joined him, grabbing a clipboard and helping separate the items. "You ever think about full-time?" Vincent asked without warning. Jordan paused, hands full of zip ties. "Here." Vincent nodded. "You've got a good eye for the layout. You spot things others don't." Jordan adjusted his cap. "I mean, yeah, I've thought about it, but I've got night shifts at the grocery store. I need both to cover rent." "I can move you to 30 hours here. Higher pay. We've got room in the budget now that some things have been cleared out." Jordan looked unsure. "You're serious?" "I don't offer things, can't stand behind." Jordan nodded slowly, eyes darting to the supply sheet like he didn't want to look directly at the offer too long. "All right, I'm in." In the front lobby, Arif was updating the Success Stories wall with a newly printed photo of Ellie, the deaf dog now living with her adopters in a quiet home on the edge of town. He was meticulous, measuring tape in one hand, tacks in the other. He didn't notice Vincent approach until the photo was already perfectly aligned. "You ever think about leading the new volunteer orientation?" Vincent asked. Arif turned surprised. "Me?" "You've got patience most people don't, and you don't talk just to hear yourself. That's rare." Arif hesitated. "I wouldn't know what to say." "You'd figure it out. I'll be there the first few times if you want backup." Arif nodded once, then went back to lining up the next photo. At 9 sharp, the shelter's regional training coordinator, Lysette, arrived. Vincent had called her in late last week after reviewing the staff turnover reports from the past 6 months. She was sharp, no nonsense, and had a reputation for exposing gaps where others saw routine. They met in the back office, while Dean and the others continued with morning routines. Lysette didn't waste time. "You wanted a full assessment of this location. I've got it." Vincent leaned forward in his chair. "Let's hear it." "Intake protocols are solid now, but there's no formal trauma training for staff. No de-escalation procedures. No written policy on how to manage difficult surrenders. And before you stepped in, there was zero accountability from leadership." Vincent nodded. "What else?" 3 volunteers reported being turned away or discouraged within the last year. One of them was underage, but the other 2 were rejected based on appearance. One was a black man with dreadlocks who was told he wouldn't fit in. That's inexcusable. Vincent's jaw tightened. "I want mandatory anti-discrimination training rolled out across all locations by next quarter. No delays." "I'll draft the plan this week." She paused. "You also need a new senior handler, someone who's respected, trained, and fair." "I've got someone in mind," Vincent said, "but I want your opinion after you observe them." Lysette nodded. Fair enough, I'll stay through the end of the day. By noon, the shelter was full again. A school group had arrived for a tour, and Maya guided them through the facility with a calm, clear tone. She explained the intake process, the importance of spay and neuter, and even answered a tough question about euthanasia with honesty and compassion. Lysette watched quietly from the side. Later, in the break room, she turned to Vincent. She's got the instincts. Train her and she'll be one of your best. Vincent nodded. She's already halfway there. At closing time, a tall man in a crisp jacket arrived unannounced. He introduced himself as a city inspector, following up on a report about improper adoption procedures and handling of donation funds. We already addressed the issue, Vincent said calmly. The employee involved was terminated. I've implemented new financial protocols and submitted the corrective measures to the city office last Friday. The inspector raised an eyebrow. You're Vincent Foster. I am. The man reviewed the paperwork Vincent handed over, flipping through the receipts, adoption logs, and the new volunteer policy. After 10 minutes, he closed the folder. You're ahead of most. We won't be behind again, Vincent said. The inspector nodded once. I'll file this as resolved. As the door shut behind him, Vincent looked around the lobby. The dogs were settled. The staff was still working, and the last adopter of the day was walking out with a shy beagle in her arms. Dean walked over, rolling his shoulder with a wince. We're getting there. Vincent nodded. We are. Outside, the wind had picked up. Clouds were gathering over the hills, and the next storm would likely hit before morning. But the shelter was ready. For the first time in a long while, Vincent was certain of that. He stepped into the back room, hung up his jacket, and grabbed a leash. There was still one last dog to walk. And he wasn't going to ask someone else to do it.